The intention of this project is to support the management of materials in New York State that otherwise might be disposed by understanding what's in the garbage, trying to get the valuable materials out of garbage, and to promote better recycling processes. For about 30 years, I've been having discussions with a person in New York State Department of Environmental Conservation about how best to determine how much solid waste there is and what solid waste is made of. And about 2 years ago, David Vitale, who's the person, came to me and said, okay, I've got resources. How would you go about determining this for New York State? I was to start on this, and then I recruited in Dr. Hewitt and Dr. Heh, and then we brought in Dr. Thyberg and the various graduate students and undergraduate students who were working on the project.
Once we arrive, we put everything from truck down there, and then we set up the tables first. And then we have each basket around the paper recyclables, and then each labels for each basket. And then we start sorting. So starting from the big ones like OCC, boxboard, big ones, books, those you can pick up from the paper recyclables. And then we put the small ones on the table, and then we're sorting the small ones.
Are receipts printer paper?
Glossy paper. Glossy. Here we have a bundle of newspapers.
And then once we put everything in each category, we weigh each of them and then make notes of each of them.
We have about 200 to 300 pounds of sorted paper here. Mostly composed of magazines, cardboard, scrap paper. The little fines is a mixture of scrap paper and pieces of mail. This is also wet cardboard since it's rained, so this has a little added weight into it.
Even though it's recycled, we all recycle, but we still find like a bunch of other stuff that doesn't fall into recycle categories.
I think this time we learned more about paper, and I think I learned about 8 different kinds of paper. It's very interesting.
The hardest part of doing something is finding the rhythm, and that's when things start moving forward quicker.
It's always been of interest to try to determine what's in garbage, because our management of garbage is seen as an environmentally important activity, because how we dispose of garbage has impacts, and if we can recycle, we can prevent extracting new materials to make goods, but actually make goods out of our old materials. That should reduce environmental impacts that people have on the world.
There was a lot of number 2 plastics, so a lot of milk containers. There were also a lot of Ferris containers, so canned food, Friskies, like pet food basically.
This is apparently Ferris.
And there was a lot of glass containers for wine and liquors.
We noticed a difference in the contents of the samples based on the location of where we were sampling. So for example, while we were in Utica, we noticed that there was a lot more paper in their single stream recyclables. Whereas in Walton, we noticed that there was a lot more containers and a lot more aluminum cans. We also noticed a difference in contaminants based on location. So in Walton, we noticed that there was a lot less plastic film contaminants in their recyclables.
So this is my first experience doing something like this, and it actually made me see trash differently.
Gloves, both inner and outer, knee pads, coveralls, safety vest. So we have all the gear. Make sure that you enter, before you enter, you have all your PPE on you. We have an area for us which is like squared off, away from the moving traffic. We don't want to be going inside the facility.
We learned a lot about how to categorize different types of waste.
Is it mostly paper or mostly plastic?
A new thing that I learned was the rule of predominance. For example, I found a wind chime which had both metal and wood. So the rule of predominance states that whichever material is the most, you put it in that whichever category it is in.
What is the bag itself?
The bag itself is a plastic wrapper.
A film plastic. Okay, good.
It ended up being a good amount of waste. It's a lot of food.
It seemed like a lot of food, a lot of plastic film, which wasn't super surprising. What was more surprising was the fact that there was so many textiles, I guess, because people threw out so many mattresses. Honestly, it didn't smell as bad as I thought it was going to.
It was a lot easier when you have the Tyvek suit on and the air mask to block everything out. Plus, what I didn't know is that they actually treat the garbage at landfills so that they don't smell as bad.
31.6?
Total, yes.
It was very interesting to see how it works there and learn about their processes and everything that they use in order to go through the entire process of receiving the garbage and then what they do with it.
Watch out for hazards.
Plastic, right?
What sort of plastic?
Plastic film.
Good.
We burn MSW, transform it into electricity, power back to the homes in the neighborhood.
Just kind of like pick up on stuff and learn new things to make the process faster and easier. So we just started to realize that we have to, in order to sort faster, we have to put the bins that are most related or closely related together in close proximity so we know where they are at. So if you want plastic, all the plastic stuff is going to be in this general location. All the paper stuff is going to be in this general location. And because of that, it just like, it helped to make everything easier and just go along faster.
Turn around a little bit more. What's a deposit? So it's the number one deposit.
Currently, our findings are a little bit limited. We had grand expectations of doing a tremendous amount of sorting of garbage across New York State. We had hoped between the sampling in October 2019 through summer sampling here in 2020 that we might collect as many as 500 samples from various places in the state. We got a slower start because it proved to be administratively and logistically more difficult than we anticipated to arrange to get to facilities to sample. Then come March, COVID-19 interfered in a big way by shutting down the field research. What we have done instead is we pivoted, and now we're doing data entry from several hundred studies similar to the kind of work we wanted to do, which was to sort garbage into various categories and describe waste streams. And we're looking at the 200 or so studies that other people have done and published, and we're putting all that data into a consistent data format. And that will enable us to do a lot of background research. on their composition of garbage. And as the students will no doubt tell you, these studies are a lot more complicated than they seem, at least at first glance. But we're plowing ahead, and we hope to be able to report some interesting data this fall. And over the fall and winter, we're also going to try to set up the situation so that if conditions allow, we'll resume sampling again in the summer of 2021.
We're at the ground level looking at a very detailed sort of snapshot of waste in New York State, but that has a lot of very large implications for policy and for decision making at a higher level. And so that is, I think, where we can really add some value, both to the state and then to various municipalities throughout the state as well. I'm also very interested in the social science questions that come along with this in terms of people's behavior. There are a lot of differences in trash that's collected at different days of the week. So people do have different patterns over the weekend than they do during the week. Getting a more granular look at what people do with their trash and why, and perhaps how we can then begin to modify some behaviors. It's been interesting to see the way that the decision makers on the ground respond to us coming in as researchers and the way that they're so willing to be engaged. Obviously, it's difficult in some places to get in and do what we want to do, but for the most part, people are very, very supportive of this research and very interested in the work that we're doing and in the data that we're gathering, because I think that speaks to the value that the data might have for them as well. The other tasks that we've been working on, one of which is a modeling project, has developed a really interesting online tool that is not currently live or public, but will be shared with the state soon. And that will allow municipalities to actually play with some numbers and come up with some sort of a cost-benefit analysis for recycling different types of materials. That also, I think, can be a really valuable asset to decision makers in different towns and municipalities.
We are creating a web-based model to calculate cost and savings for recycling. That's following New York State law. On the process, we have to take into account transportation, collection source, and also the economic markets.
120AA is the policy that we're referring to, and that requires these municipalities or these managers to recycle materials based on their economic market. So if there's no market for these materials, so like glass or bottles, if no one wants to buy them or they're losing money on actually recycling, then New York State says if there's no economic market, you don't have to recycle. It's kind of tough because prices in the market for recyclables are kind of volatile. By making this model, we're kind of guiding these waste managers and showing them like, hey, there's savings and there's costs and maybe there's a revenue for which they can profit off these recyclables.
The model was created using Microsoft Excel, and we created 3 different options. These options are: number 1, using your own values to calculate the cost. The option 2 is using preset numbers, and option 3 is using a preset numbers with the breakdown. So I'm going to start with the instructions. They are always at the top of each model. Number 1, we're going to enter the values marked within the red box, which means this red box right here. Number 2, to reset all the entries after we make all the calculations, we find a button at the bottom that says reset, and we can also go to the bottom of this model to see a breakdown of the recyclable materials. So that will be this breakdown at the bottom. I'm just gonna do a quick example running different kind of numbers. It really is just to show you how it's used. So first I enter my recyclable tons, which is 20, my disposed waste in tons, that's 80, recycled yard waste in tons, that's 10. You can see how you're gonna be updating the percentages on your right cell, indicating how much of these tonnages you are using. I also have the option to enter any additional cost, and that will be added to the total amount of cost per week cost per year, total tonnages per week, and the system cost per ton. And you can get the numbers at the bottom, which will be the breakdown of the recyclables. The model is going to have two versions, one for single stream, one for dual stream.
The most important thing we wanted to add between the two is that continuity and consistency. So whoever's using the single stream could also pick up and use a dual stream without any issue.
And we're also working on a paper that's gonna summarize all the work that we have been doing, the research.
Long term, the goal is that we hope that our model gives these municipalities some sort of framework to calculate what it means for recyclable materials to be economically feasible.
I work with the team to investigate the impact of China's national SWAT policy, or we call it garbage import ban, and its effect on the state recycling and waste management, and how technical and business decisions are made prior to this policy and the implementations of the policy, and how that would impact the international trade or international management of waste. We hope to understand how national policy would impact the global sustainability, including the impact to New York State and Long Island local businesses.
We are working on the effects of national food policy in United States, but mostly it was concerned about the Brookhaven Material Recovery Facility, all about the history, development of curbsides, then how was the dual stream working, single stream working, how was few programs like pay as you throw, automated collections, and different contamination issues. The Brookhaven Material Recovery Facility was built in 1991. From 1991 to 2013, the town of Brookhaven used to collect through the dual stream approach, where paper recyclables were collected separately from the container recyclables. And the town had largely automated facility. In 2014, the recyclable process was changed to single stream, and the set outs of recyclable by residents was 25%. And the facility operated successfully till 2018. It closed in 2018 when China implemented the national food policy, which rejected low quality plastic, paper, and recyclable materials. And because of this, it resulted in a decrease in US recyclable export to China from 33% to 2%.
We're focusing on the policy side that mostly influence the US market. So all these policies arise the regulation and put a lot of pressure on the market. Recyclables like plastics, paper, and other things. Before all these policies were implemented, the market is highly liquid. People was making a lot of money out of this industry. And then after this policy implemented, everything price went down. When we more focused on this issue, we found out that it's not only because of the environmental problem that they are implementing these policies. It has highly political motivation. In this solid waste market, it's very, very profit-driven.
After working in this project, we know that, okay, these things are recyclable, but still people everywhere don't know how to recycle things properly or where to put the waste in which bin.
The education part is very important, education to public. So let's say most of the students in Stony Brook University campus have no idea where this trash will go after they dump in the trash can.
We have visited many material recovery facilities and talked with stakeholders to understand the local changes and the challenges. We have been doing extensive review of literature, news, reports, and data, both in Chinese and in English sources, to analyze the drivers of the policy change and the impact of those changes.
The bigger picture regarding waste management is where this is really interesting and valuable to policymakers, to regulatory bodies.
In order to do that in a rational way, it would really help to understand what's in the garbage, what exactly people are throwing out, how that changes over time, and how it changes from place to place.